everyone. Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Venu Gupta, Director of the Chicago Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights. You are joining us for our monthly virtual conversation called Civil Rights Right Now. Y- for everyone who is here, and I know we have more folks joining, you are in for a tremendous hour this month through really, I think, good luck and the hard work of Williams Works and Mika Rao, we were able to connect with Mr. Luis Miranda. Mr. Miranda, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me here. Looking forward uh, to talk about everything that is happening in life.
Yeah, yes. There certainly is a lot happening. I'm so glad to see a smile on your face. I'll be honest. I had to sort of like work myself up to a smile, but knowing that we were going to be speaking with you today definitely helped. Um, we're going to go through a brief intro. Folks, we're going to talk a little bit about the background of Louisiana v. Calais, which was decided yesterday by the Supreme Court, and then we're going to get into questions. We will be taking questions from you. If you look on your Zoom screen and look to the right, there should be a more button. You can put in questions there, and for the last 15 minutes, I'll be asking Mr. Miranda the questions that you all have. But I know you all want to hear from him and not me, so we're going to get started. Mr. Miranda has spent more than 4 decades at the intersection of politics, civic power, and community, and there are few people who have done more to build Latino political infrastructure and I would say political infrastructure for people of color and folks who have been otherwise marginalized because it all builds on itself um, in this country. So thank you for that, Mr. Miranda. You were a founding partner of the MirRam Group, one of the country's leading political consulting firms. He has advised some of the most consequential campaigns of our era. You are also a founding president of the Hispanic Federation, one of the nation's premier Latino nonprofit organizations. I saw the photos of the great gala you all had a few weeks ago. It looked tremendous. You were also the board chair of Latino Victory, the founder of the Amber Charter School in East Harlem, and a driving force behind arts and culture institutions in New York and Puerto Rico, and I just recently learned Chicago. Um, you earned your BA from the University of Puerto Rico, pursued graduate work in psychology at NYU, and you hold honorary doctorates from Rhode Island College and the CUNY Graduate Center. You are also the author of Relentless, a memoir that really is as much a story of how the Latino and immigrant spirit transformed America as much as it is your own story. Um, and welcome, welcome, welcome. I want to get into the Supreme Court decision, but I also recently saw that your grandson graduated from high school. Congratulations.
Every time one of them graduates, we all celebrate. In fact, my daughter and I flew to Miami. We're a very enmeshed family. You'll learn more about it. But 2 days ago, my daughter and I flew to Miami to get a place for him to live. When he goes to the School of Music at the University of Miami, we hope he will like the place that we picked for him, but that's the way it happens in my family. The older ones pick for the younger ones. They'll get their turn later on.
Um, yeah, that music gene in your family seems to be quite strong.
It is. It is.
Yeah. Well, congratulations again. So let's get into it. I want to give the folks who are joining us here today just a really quick background on what happened in the Supreme Court, because so many people are trying to understand what the implications are. So we're having this conversation the day after the Supreme Court issued its 6-3 ruling in Louisiana versus Calais, which struck down Louisiana's majority Black congressional district and really significantly narrowed the scope of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. But really, to be honest, it's made it so difficult to create majority minority districts that Justice Kagan in her dissent essentially said they've killed the spirit of the law that the Voting Rights Act was meant to remedy. So the decision written by Justice Alito holds that to successfully challenge a map under the Voting Rights Act, plaintiffs must now show a strong influence of intentional racial discrimination, which is a far higher bar than the previous framework. In fact, if you ask voting rights experts, they'll tell you it's almost impossible to show that there's intentional discrimination when drawing a map. The conservative majority decades of progress in minority voter registration and turnout have made race-conscious redistricting unnecessary. And then, as I mentioned in her dissent, Justice Kagan said the ruling makes it nearly impossible to use race in drawing maps and sets back the right of racial equality and electoral opportunity. The practical consequences are pretty immediate. Florida's legislature passed a new map hours after the decision. Louisiana will likely lose a Democratic district, and a wave of litigation is expected as slates move to redraw maps in reliance on the ruling. I believe Louisiana has suspended their primaries in order to redraw their maps. So, with that, um, you've spent your career building Latino political power, and political power depends on maps that reflect community. What does yesterday's decision mean for its impact on communities, Latino communities, to build power? You're on mute.
Yeah,
There we
you need it. I unmute when I heard the phone ring, and then I
go.
couldn't unmute myself. Uh, uh,
Please.
thank you for the intro, and the implications are a cascade of events that we cannot even begin to comprehend.
Yeah.
Uh, there are many districts throughout the country, in places where Latinos are not the majority, where you actually need to spend a little bit zigzagging through communities to make sure that we are represented. And that is certainly not something bad, but a necessary reality if we want to have diverse voices in Congress, in city councils, in state legislatures, and the possibility that many of those districts will be challenged by an individual. It's right there, in places like New York, where we have 500,000 people, or Chicago, in 50 blocks, the impact may be less. But
Mm,
in places like Louisiana, I was just in a conversation about a district in Nebraska where Latinos are 20% of the vote. We're not even the majority. But to create those political communities, it's an important component of democracy as we know in this country.
absolutely agree. I know it's only been a day, but curious about what you're hearing from the Latino community or others about what a response or what a pivot might be as this is all of this is litigated to building power. I mean, our communities will build power. There's nothing will stop us, and yet this is a blow.
It is, and it's one of many. uh, that have been taking uh, place within the last decade. Uh, and the unfortunate thing, people tell me all the time, don't worry. In November, we'll change Congress and we'll get a Democratic majority. We'll fight to get the Senate. But many of these changes are going to take decades to undo. The civil rights movement and the Voting Rights Act of 65 took decades after slavery to become law.
Yeah.
So that we magically think that an election is going to undo all of this political harm, it makes us feel better. Believe me, sometimes I want to believe my own fantasy, but it's not true. It's going to take a very long time. The positive thing is that there are organizations like yours in Chicago and all over the country who are not afraid to go to court over and over and over and over to undo some of these injustices. So, on the one hand, we start with little steps by voting and getting people who believe differently. And then we have to rely on organizations like yours to begin to undo all of this harm with a Supreme Court that obviously sings to Trump's tune, and they're so young. They're going to be there for a long, long time. I will be long dead, and they're going to continue to do harm.
Yes. I think one of the things that there is a narrative that has been created around the things that help Latino people help that give Latino people civil rights or give African American civil rights, that it's somehow a pie, and that if I get a piece of pie, it means you get less, right? And it couldn't be further from the truth. Civil rights are not pie. When we do things to ensure that everyone has a tangible right to vote, that means everybody, right? So even though that the Supreme Court decision seems to think civil rights are pie, and they're not, right? So that if we are creating an equal opportunity for Latino communities to have representation, it also means that we are creating a greater possibility for everybody to vote and make their vote real. So I appreciate what you just said. I'm It's actually a really great segue to the next question, which is, in this moment, given everything that you've done, how does your own story inform the way you're showing up and how you're feeling about this moment?
Uh, my wife and I first date was in Washington, D.C., protesting the Bakke case decision. That was
Wow.
our first date. It is so ironic that we have gone full circle uh, in the history
Oh my
of
God.
civil rights in this country. We now have participated in every No King's March there is, uh, because we strongly believe that when everyone is around the table, we have a stronger country.
Yeah.
We build a stronger democracy. The pie analogy It's wrong. It's the smell of the pie, what it's right, because everyone can smell it, inhale, and get a piece of it and participate in the deliciousness of what democracy is. And so for us, what continues to fuel us, it's that there's always a wrong to be righted. Uh, and we taught our kids that that was the right thing to do. We spent Christmas and Three Kings Day collecting toys in the neighborhood for kids who were less fortunate than them. We spent Thanksgiving uh, getting food for others. We spent election cycles registering people to vote and collecting petitions to support those candidates. We thought and continue to think were important to elevate democracy and the democratic process. So nothing has changed on our outlook of life. We
Mhm.
have been fortunate, quite frankly, since Hamilton, that we got two new things. One was a big microphone that our son brought to our family. And we are not afraid to use that microphone anytime we can. And we are not in any way frightened to say uncomfortable things with that microphone. And the second thing was resources. We
Yes.
spend our lives giving human capital to the things that we believed in. Now we could also support them financially because God figured, okay, these guys have been good guys for a while. Let them give a little bit of resources so that they can continue to do good. So at this particular time where there's so many fires, uh, where there's so many battles, uh,
Yeah.
we pick those that we think are going to be best on the one hand for Latino communities, for minority communities, but for the greater good. When we go and we support a candidate in Nebraska where we are a minority, that person needs to get elected not only with Latino votes, she needs to go and convince the
Yeah.
larger electorate that she's the best for the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So we are constantly trying to figure out which causes, which institutions, which political candidates, because we want to participate in all of those fronts to make sure that we have 250 more years of a more perfect union.
Mr. Miranda, you brought this up. I wasn't planning on asking this, but your answer is really compelling me too, which is from even before the beginning of this country, there has been a sustained effort to try to convince people that it's better to stay, it's better off to stay divided than to be united, and that an equitable multiracial democracy actually will leave some people worse off. And I think, frankly, you brought up Hamilton. I think Hamilton did a tremendous job of of showing what it looked like to turn our conception of what our history is like on its head. Um, and I wonder what narratives, including what your son did with part of our history, but what are the narratives that are going to be effective in encountering that? Right? Divide and conquer is as old as our species.
I'll start with my son and Hamilton, uh, because the most important thing from my perspective, artistically, people who criticize and know about art should handle that. It taught the world, and I say it all the time, that the son of Puerto Rican parents can propel the history of our country in a
Yes.
way that no one had been able to before. And that's the greatness of our country, that someone can come here and that generation and the next generation is ready to be part of a country and try to make it a better union. So I'll start with that. But the second part again, and Hamilton, it's now in Chicago. You should all go and see it if you haven't seen it. If you saw it, go back. Uh, the the second part that it's important for us, it's the Hamilton education program that
Mm,
we created. Lin-Manuel, the producers, our family felt when Hamilton exploded that only the elite was going to get to
mhm,
see that work of art.
mhm,
And we wanted to make sure that it was accessible. So creating a program when at this point, 1.3 million high school students have participated in a curriculum created around this work of art, teaching civics and the beginnings of our nation. It's a contribution to one of the issues that we're living now, which is that civics, it's eroding, that
mhm.
people are not learning history. And so you can never learn from the mistakes that others before us made and try to remedy. And we have an administration that have decided that trying to erase 120 million people who live in this country, who are from somewhere but are not Anglo-Saxon, it's the right thing to do. And believe me, we will win at the end. We always do, because our country is resilient.
Yes. You're right, we will win. Um, so what what do you, since you've been involved in building civic power and political power, and you've just talked about kind of what how Hamilton and the fact that having that this country allows people to co-create what American history was and is going for what it's going to be, right? What is the thread, do you think, that's going to allow us to to combat this idea that it's better to be divided than it is united?
It took us in New York a while for African American, Puerto Rican, and Latino communities at that point in New York that the teachings of division was preventing any of us to ever get elected,
Yeah,
to govern for everyone,
yeah.
but to teach the larger community that we could lead and we will lead for the benefit of everyone. But that it is important for representation to take place because that's what allow a younger generation to dream that they also can have a seat at the table. And it was when Black and Latino communities realized that we elected our first African American mayor. And tons of Latinos, 70% of Latinos voted for an African American candidate. Back in 2001, a Latino was running. Again, he did not become mayor, but 70% of African Americans voted for that Latino mayor. So it is when we build these coalitions that we begin to change the face of who represents us, and we teach everyone that there's nothing to be scared about.
Mm.
Because people can be scared. And the only way you teach people that that is a fictitious fear is by doing and by realizing that life continues and it can be better. So we need to continue to build those coalitions. We saw it in New York this year when we elected Mayor Mandani. Overwhelming majority of minority neighbors voted for him with not a very long record of accomplishment when you compare it to his opponent. But people said we need to give change a chance. And let's unite to give change a chance. And I think that we're going to be doing more and more of that in this decade to come.
So, what's so heartening about what you've said is that there are many examples about multiracial solidarity to fight. And I think for the Chicago Lawyers Committee, we know that it will take multiracial solidarity in this moment. I mean, always, especially right now, to defend and protect civil rights. And you've done it.
Yeah, listen, sometimes friends tell me, you're an old man. We bought a little property in Puerto Rico. Why don't you execute the myth of the return, which is that Puerto Ricans go back home and die there? And it's unbelievable that I continue to consider myself Puerto Rican and my kids, even though 53 of my 72 years I have spent here. But this is the commitment. It's really
Mhm.
to make this now my country
Yes.
better for the next generation.
I'm not Christian, but amen. That, which is also the greatness of this country. That I can say that. Yes, it is the commitment.
It is. I am blessed that I still have my health, resources, and my mind sort of intact to continue the struggle.
I was quite sad today, this morning, but I have to say, being in conversation with you, even talking about these hard things, I can't help but smile. My cheeks are starting to hurt from all the smiling. So thank you for that. Okay, so let's just to bring it back to what it's going to now take to build a multiracial and equitable democracy. You've talked about what you've done and what people have done to get to where we were. I'm going to say were because I firmly believe that we are now in an authoritarian era. What has history taught you and your experience taught you about what it's going to take for us to build back? And let's say build back better, because it's not like the old ways were serving civil rights that well.
Correct. I I believe that now we have more resources
Mm,
to change the way the country it's going. Listen, if a generation ago, if women with less resources were able to get women suffrage, that it's a mom from the middle of the country who convinces his son to allow Tennessee to be the last state to come and begin to change history. If people with less resources and more obstacles were able to do great things to move the country forward, we're going to be able to do it again because we have more resources. We have more allies. We have a more educated community. We have the internet where in seconds we can communicate
mm,
with millions on our position and what is happening. So we now have at our disposition things to fight back. We just have to use them intelligently, use them in a cohesive way, and make sure that we put the petty differences aside for the greater good. You have no idea how many, I'm a Democrat, have been a Democratic strategist forever. And some Democrats say shit that I'm like, oh my God, why? And I breathe, I sing one of the Encanto or Moana songs in my head, calm myself down, and move forward with, okay, that was probably not the most eloquent thing to say at this point. What about this other positions? But we are constantly going to have to forgive, correct, and forge forward.
yeah. Thank you for that. I think many people are feeling um someone a friend of mine this morning described it numb and a little hopeless after after the decision. Um, and what you just offered is a reminder that we've been here before with less and fewer people, and we're not alone. And now we have more people and more resources, and we will win. Thank you. I really, really appreciate that. And a reminder to go back and watch Moana and Encanto. Which,
Listen,
oh,
when I get and I was coming from Miami that we went to look at apartments for Alejandro, and I put a Mamma Mia movie. And I don't like the movie, but I love ABBA's music. So I could hear as I continued to work just to rest my mind with beauty while I tried to create struggle.
yes, that's right. We need beauty as we struggle. That's very true. I have two more questions, and I know there are a bunch of questions in the chat. Um, one is that as I'm new to this role as ED, I became the permanent ED in January, and as I've stepped into it, there's a real, it seems like over the years, and this gets back to multiracial solidarity, there's sort of two pathways around uh civil rights, which is one is there's a community that has been fighting for immigration and the rights of immigrants. And then there is this voting rights community and kind of other separate civil rights community. My guess is you've had more experience with this than I have. Um, and yet these things are so connected. Like for Chicago Lawyers Committee in the primaries, we partnered with several immigrants' rights groups to make sure that as we were protecting people's right to vote, many of whom are immigrants, we were also making sure that if ICE showed up at the polls, that we were letting communities know that ICE was in the neighborhood and ways that they needed to be able to protect themselves. So just if I think it would be great for folks to hear how you see these movements, especially around voting rights and immigrant rights being connected, and why that connection matters so much.
And humans' rights and trans rights and
Yep,
sort of people who have been marginalized or new people that we want to marginalize now because someone decided that they are the next target. Remember, when the enemy has a target, they unite. So there always have to be a target that they go after. That's how they bring their strength together. But I, I'm going to paraphrase one of the people that I admire the most, who's my Attorney General, Letitia James. Uh, I was involved in her campaign. I adore her. If we didn't have her, we will have to create someone like her. But I hear her talk as I go to different parts of the country of what the AGs are doing. They read the manifesto before the change of administration. They started getting ready to what was coming. They began to talk among ourselves how many resources each of them had at their disposal. California and New York, as the biggest in terms of resources, were serving as bookends for many fights, and different states jump into what they could do. It is that kind of coordinated effort that we have to do, because if we move trans rights a little, we are moving human rights a little.
exactly
If
right.
we move voting rights a bit more, we are moving civil rights a little. All of these things are connected. And even if people don't connect them, it doesn't matter. It's fine if the trans stay in their lane and continue fighting for the right. They are fighting for my rights as well. So it is understanding that everything is connected, what is going to win this battle, and making sure that we pick the role that we think we could execute the best.
That's that is exactly right. It turns out all those folks talking about collective liberation are are right. We are going to, it is, it will take all of us being invested in the freedom and liberation of all of us to
I, I,
get past this.
I have spent the last couple of months, I have no idea why. I started reading about the struggles of the Irish immigrant community
Mm,
when they came here. And their struggles were so similar to many of the things that we are facing now. That's why they want to take history books out of libraries and schools, because if we're stupid to the past, we can't face the future intelligently.
Thank you for that. I'm about to turn to Q&A. Please put I know many of you have questions in the chat. If you could put those in the Q&A, again, just go to if you hit the three dots that say more, you can put the questions that you put in the chat in the Q&A. And we'll get to that in 1 second. I'll give you a little time, folks, to put your questions there. I'm going to combine these two questions because I want to hear your answers to both. One is there's going to be the administration has made it clear and obvious that they are trying to chill people from voting by talking about mail-in ballots and by the way, mail-in voting is legal in Illinois. Um, Voting is determined by the state, not by the federal government, for anyone listening.
Yep.
So do not listen to what the Trump administration is saying about how and when to vote. Check with your states. Um, so they're trying to chill voting. Um, and so wondering what you think about how organizers and advocates counter that. And what is the most important thing that people should be doing right now? Many of the folks in our audience are lawyers, law students, civic leaders. Um, I know that there are folks who are in philanthropy on the call. So, what is it that people who have any influence or power should be doing?
Whatever you could do on your lane, the lanes next to you, and lanes that you can affect in any of the possibilities to fight. Listen, the most basic thing that we need to convince everyone to do is to vote. To go and vote in the primary so you help select people who you think like you, and then certainly in the election in November. That is the basic thing. And sometimes that's all people are willing to do. And I will try to convince them to do a little more, but if I can get them to do that, that will be swell, because there are many people who are afraid to even do that, because they are afraid that their husband or their
Yep.
wife or their partner doesn't have the proper documentation, and they do, and they're going to stop them, and the family is going to be divided, blah, 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 blah. There is tons of reason. That is the least. Their marches. If you have money, donate to candidates and to organizations. I remember when I started the Hispanic Federation back in 1990, people kept telling me, the problem is that Latinos don't donate. I'm like, listen, I go to church every Sunday and everybody put their hand in their pocket and give something when they
Yep.
pass it along. So I figured, okay, now I need to document. I did a research. And when we asked Latinos, this is back in 1990, why you're not giving to nonprofits, they say because they haven't asked. They haven't asked for
That's
my
right.
money.
There's someone in the chat who said it's fundamentally untrue that Latinos don't give. That's right.
And we do, and we give to church, and we give to the things that are happening in our lives, and we send millions of dollars to our families back in our countries of origin. We are giving constantly, but the big institutions, they may not. they don't know they exist, and we haven't asked. So my sense is that we now have to use any time we want to use to educate others, to do our part, to support the institutions like yours who have been fighting the good fight for the last 55 years.
Thank you.
This is the time for full action. This is like a delivery. I remember being in the delivery rooms for my kids, and when they told Luz to push and to use all her energy to give birth, that's the moment in which we're in. We have to use all of our energy and push so that at the end we have a good result.
Mm. We're Mr. Miranda, you're remind like it's just like the idea of being doulas. We are birthing something, and we do have to give all of our energy to birthing something better.
Yep.
Okay, I could talk to you forever, as I'm sure many people feel that way about when they talk to you. I'm gonna get to the questions. Um, okay. Uh, so there's a question from um someone, Rafael Concepcion. The question is, he's working on a voting rights platform for mobilization. Thank you for doing that, Rafael. That's wonderful. Um, he said, I know I have a specific skill set and technology, but I'm completely unaware of how to get involved with groups or talk to groups or to share this information. But I constantly see that there's a lot of what he says, dare I say, failure of imagination to rally around technology to help here. How does someone put themselves in spaces where they can say, where they can share something and say, look, I think we can do something with this tech?
First of all, Rafael, my granddad was called Rafael Concepcion because I am Miranda Concepcion. That's my mother's name. So thank you for reminding me of my wonderful grandfather who always walked with like $20 in dollar bills to think that he had a lot of money. And he will give you a buck and take that big pack of dollar bills to give you a dollar. But I will tell you, if you are in Chicago, I urge you to look at the Hispanic Federation .org, where there are member agencies, many that are doing this work. I'm sure that you have other
Hmm.
organizations with whom you're working,
Yes.
who are doing voter registration. And quite frankly, using technology, it's fantastic for voter registration uh, because it allows you to be quicker, touch more souls, and then use that data to get people out to vote. Because quite frankly, registering them to vote, it's the minuscule step to be ready. Uh, and now becoming more difficult because everything that is being done to even prevent that happen. The real challenge with all of the obstacles now is to get them out to vote.
Yep. So there are two questions on this very thing, Mr. Miranda, which is there's an acknowledgement that there's an effort to make people afraid to vote. What, again, what are you hearing or what conversations are you in to help folks who are trying to create solutions to make people feel like it's safe to vote, especially when the administration, whether they send ICE to the polls or not, are threatening to, right? So what can we do to meet people where they are, given that
Listen,
many are afraid to vote?
during the last King's March, a couple of my friends, because I started calling people to come, told me we can't go we're in the middle of asking for our partner to be naturalized. And I don't want to get arrested because I am the party that is requesting that partner to be in this country. We
Yes.
have to respect that.
Mm.
Uh, and there are people who don't care, and I applaud them and kiss them. But there are some people who are afraid, and I applaud them and kiss them. I want them to do something else if that's not what they can do. Okay, you can do that. These are two organizations that you could send $10 to
Mm.
so that they are mobilizing the people that we need to do that. So there is always real reasons why people cannot do, but there is something that they can do. And it's having that dialogue to figure out what is it that we can do. Uh, and we're going to have lots of those over the next several months and several years. So let's be patient and let's talk to people and see what they can do. But I won't let anyone tell me that I cannot do this and not that and the other. And now you're being a dork. There has to be something that you could do, and we're going to figure out what is it. And then you're going to go ahead and do it.
Thank you. It's why at the Chicago Lawyers Committee we believe so strongly in walking with communities and organizers who organize communities, because when people have real relationships with people, they can better understand what it is that folks can do, right?
Yes, in fact, you gave our nation and the world one of the best community organizers ever, who was one of our best presidents ever.
Yes, no comment. We are a nonpartisan organization, but
Oh, but
community
once you're
organization.
president, you're the president of everyone.
That is true. That is true. Um, all right, we are at the end. I one of the things I like to think about is we are in this moment. We cannot change that. But I think about what has to be true in 5 years for this to have been the best thing that ever happened to this country, which is a hard thing to like, what do we have to do with this moment for it to be a breakthrough instead of a breakdown?
That we were able to have successes in so many areas of our lives,
Mm.
that there is a new Hamilton out there. I don't mean in theme, I mean in art. That our museums are stronger and are presenting more diverse art from the many communities that are part of who we are. That we have a Congress that have the best representation of women, man, diversity, gays, trans. It is to begin to achieve that
Mm.
when we're actually moving towards our constitution, we the people. It is when we have, and in 5 years, we're not going to be there, but if we have gone a bit better, we would have achieved what we need to be building now.
Thank you so much, Mr. Miranda, for your time and your insight and for everything that you've done to make this a more perfect union. We're very grateful. Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Goodbye. Thank you. Thanks everybody for joining us. We hope you'll be at our next Civil Rights Right Now virtual conversation where we'll be talking with two former EEOC commissioners. And we'll be sending out information about it.